Hello, I'm Kate and I'm a gardener, and today I want to talk to you all about seed sowing, and I want to share some of the tips that I use to just ensure that I have as successful germination as possible. So let's start with compost. So compost is so important to get right when you are sowing seeds. So for teeny tiny seeds like tomatoes, chilies, lettuce, then I always go for a peat-free seed and cutting compost. And that's because the texture is so much finer. So you think those little roots need to be able to get down into the compost. And also it really helps with air porosity and water and drainage. So tiny seeds, I would always advise using a seed compost like this one here. For bigger seeds such as courgettes and sweet peas, I'll opt for a multi-purpose compost, but what I do is I'll always sieve it first just to remove any larger lumps. Now, the seed and cutting compost has very, very low levels of nutrients, and for small seeds and tiny seedlings, you don't need high levels of feed, and in fact they can cause problems by scorching the roots. So what happens is, if you think that tiny seed actually has all the feed needed to give those first seed leaves and then those first true leaves of the plant. Whereas for the larger seeds, they can cope with a bit of extra feed because they are a bit bigger and they've got a bit more to feed. My top tip with compost, which quite a few people don't do, is bring it inside overnight, and that's to warm it up, because seeds hate sitting in cold, damp compost. And if you think, often we buy our compost, we get it delivered, we put it into a cold shed, or we pick it up from the garden centre and it's been outside in their yard, that compost can be really, really cold. So bring it in overnight, will come up to room temperature, which is absolutely perfect for sowing your seeds. Okay, so that's compost. Next, I want to talk about containers. Now, seeds are pretty happy being grown in anything, but there are some rules you have to follow. And the first one has to have drainage holes. So plastic containers like this, takeaway containers, yogurt pots, brilliant, and they're so great to recycle, but you have to put drainage holes in, because seeds will not like sitting in very, very wet compost. And if there's no holes, there's nowhere for the water to go, seeds are going to rot. So yes, recycle, but don't forget pop holes in. I am going to use some ready-made seed trays, because after 25 years of gardening, I have lots and lots of them, so I don't need to buy any more. But if you are going to buy your ready-made ones, then make sure you get the sturdier ones. So pay a little bit more, because they will last you a lot longer. I like using small seed trays. I have a small garden, so I try not to sow too many, because otherwise you're just inundated and you've got nowhere to put the seedlings when they get a bit bigger. I really like using these seed trays. These are cells, known as cells or module trays, and these are well made, but also they've got silicone at the bottom, so you can just pop this up when it's time to transplant. And actually, looking at this seed tray has reminded me of something really important to do, and that is to clean out all your trays. So last year's compost, old food, they can all carry disease and fungal spores, and our poor little seedlings, they're very, very vulnerable to anything like that, especially fungal spores, and that can cause damping off. And damping off, once you've got it, there's absolutely nothing you can do to help those seedlings recover. So basically, you want to give your seedlings the best start in life. Now, I do use cardboard, so I often use toilet roll tube holders for things like sweet peas and beans, because they give them that extra root run. But again, they don't need to have any holes put in them. But just be really, really careful not to overwater cardboard containers, because then they will just rot too quickly and they'll start to break down before they're ready to be transplanted out. So let's talk about the seeds themselves. Seeds are miraculous. Dry little things, yet within a few months they will grow and you can have food to feed yourself and a garden full of flowers. So what you need to know before you start sowing your seed is the date, because seed only lasts for a certain amount of time, and actually fresh is best. So always on every seed packet will be the best before date, as it were, and usually it's the last date you should be sowing it by. These seed packets are really, really important. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't normally like to read an instruction packet, I would urge you to make sure you read the back of pack of your seed, because they give you all the information that you need. They'll give you what to sow it in, whether or not you need to sprinkle compost on the top, whether or not you need to put something called vermiculite over the top. It gives you the temperature, so whether or not you need a heat mat or a propagator. Always check your seed packet. Some seeds are slightly different in that they do much better from being soaked overnight. So sweet peas, they like to be soaked overnight because they've got a really hard seed coating, so you can soften it by soaking them. I tend to have success without, but I know lots of people absolutely swear by it. And there are some seeds that even need to go in the fridge, and that's a process called stratification, because they need that cold to shock them out of their dormancy. So again, all this information is on the back of pack, so try and look after your seed packets so that you can still read them.